Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. It's January 10th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host today. You can send us your questions and comments to questions@schillerinstitute.org. I want to open our discussion by asking for your assessment, Helga, of two extremely important developments. One being the tractors rolling across Germany in a protest against the government and the EU policies in general, which is gathering a lot of support from the general population. And secondly, the hearing that's taking place tomorrow in the International Court of Justice on a motion that was filed by South Africa to find Israel guilty of genocide under the Genocide Convention Act of 1948. These reflect a shift from the passivity of accepting outrageous policies to what appears to be a change in the unwillingness to accept such kinds of policies. Do you see these events as an indication that there's a tide turning, that more people will be willing to step forward and speak out? And do you think this is a reflection of the courage shown by the leaders of the global South in making their voices heard?
Well, yes, I would definitely say so because to start with the situation in Germany, I think this is really the beginning of a game changer, or it is a game changer because the farmers who have been protesting and complaining for a very, very long time against the policies of the various governments ranging back a long time, but escalating naturally with this unspeakable so-called streetlight coalition, which everybody agrees is the worst government Germany had since the Second World War. This has now erupted because the farmers and many others with them, but especially the farmers, are expressing very clearly that they see their existence threatened through a combination of ever more cuts, this time the diesel fuel subsidies, but also lots of bureaucratic rules which make their life impossible, that they're not controlling their prices. So this has erupted now, but I think what comes out in this very, very, and I must really applaud the German farmers. I think every German is extremely proud that some segment of the population, where for a long time, if you would ask people in Germany, what do you think? Everybody would say, or 99% of the people would say, Germany is crashing against the wall. These present forces, powers to be, are ruining everything which generation after generation built after the Second World War. And, but then they would normally say there's nothing you can do. And, both the coalition government and the opposition was regarded as relatively the same, with the exception naturally of the AfD, but many people thought that that is not something you can really vote because of some very problematic circles within the AfD. So, for a long time, the German situation looked really terrible because the German economy was collapsing and collapsing, and especially after the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, where everybody is, suspecting that Seymour Hersh was right by saying it was the United States which did it, demanding an investigation. But, people knew that the terrible collapse of the German economy, the German agriculture, was in large part the result of the sanctions against Russia, which, were really forced upon Germany, that Germany had to carry them out as part of the general transatlantic policy. But also the increase of the energy prices, the gas from Russia was no longer available. So everybody had the feeling the country is going down and down and down, and there is no force which has the guts to do something about it. And now, basically, you had on Monday more than 100,000 tractors. And, there are many videos circulating in the internet. 100,000 tractors, that's a lot of long lines. And in demonstrations took place in 100 cities in all 16 states. And they were supported by the truckers, by workers from the construction sector, bringing in their trucks or their cement machines or other construction machines, but also craftsmen. But also, if you go through some towns in Germany, you see in the windows they have signs: "We support the fight of the German farmers." So I think this is now the beginning of something which I cannot see how this can be undone, because the action by the farmers has given the farmers a new sense of confidence about what they can do. And if you listen to them, it was extremely peaceful, contrary to a vicious attempt before the demonstration to criminalize it by saying it's subverted by right-wing circles. Then they tried to blow up an incident where the economic minister Habeck came back from an island in the North Sea, and his ferry was then trying to dock in Schleswig-Holstein in a little port. And then farmers tried to talk to him. Reconstructing it, nothing really big happened. It was not a violent attack, but the captain of the ferry decided to turn the ferry around and not go to land with Habeck. So this was blown up as a big thing, as this is the sign that these farmers are trying to topple the state. I think nothing of that sort. The former head of the police trade union went totally ridiculized all of these attempts, and everybody praised the farmers, the police. They praised the collaboration of the police with the farmers. So I think this was a very excellent demonstration of statecraft, of really taking responsibility. And naturally, this will go on, I would think, until the Streetlight Coalition takes these cuts back, which we will see. There are more demonstrations for the whole week. Next Monday, on the 15th, they have called for a huge national demonstration, and the whole week local demonstrations with cutting off highway access to highways and blocking roads is going to continue. And today, the strike of the locomotive trade union is going on for 3 days. So I think that there is a real shift in Germany. And the good thing is, and that is also being reported by all the media, that about 90% of the population support the farmers, and only 10, people say they're disturbing my daily work and this. But people really understand that the German farmers are fighting the fight for all of Germany. So I think this is excellent. And there are farmers all over the world who are sending support telegrams. And if you listen to this show and you have anything to do, or even if you don't have anything to do with farming, send support telegrams, make short videos to the German farmers, because I think they are right now the spearhead of the fight to put the economy back in a correct on a correct basis. Now, the second event you are mentioning, tomorrow starts the hearing in Den Haag, having a hearing on the demand by the South African government to investigate if Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And, there are now many organizations and many individuals, but many hundreds of organizations who have joined the support. And here again, I would say, that it is a sign of the time that it's a country of the global South, of Africa, of the BRICS, who takes the moral leadership to try to stop what is going on in Gaza, which is absolutely horrible and getting worse by the day. There are now estimates that every day thousands of people are dying of hunger and thirst. And it is an estimate that in the next several months, a quarter of the entire population of Gaza, that is 500,000 people, are in immediate danger of dying of disease because of the collapse of sanitation, no clean water, and things like that. So it's super, super urgent that a ceasefire occurs and that, basically peace negotiations and a comprehensive approach, like proposed by China with the Middle East Conference, that is being put on the agenda. But the fact that it is a country of the global South and not of the so-called value-based Western order, rules-based order, who is showing this moral leadership, I think that's also a sign of the time. And it just means that the leadership is shifting to the global South because the West obviously has lost it.
Now, Helga, you sort of answered this, but we do have a question. Someone asked, is the German population supporting the farmers' protest?
Yes, I think it is a very, very important sign that, in past struggles, you would have misunderstandings and so forth. But I think this time, for the reason I already touched upon, that, I had many discussions in the last year, and whoever you would speak with, bakers, farm workers, entrepreneurs, Mittelstand, managers, whatnot, they would all say, "Look, Germany is collapsing." And it is collapsing. You have an absolute shrinking of the middle level industries. You have a collapse of many towns become like ghost towns where shops are closing in the middle of the city, restaurants are closing down, and that has naturally all to do with the high energy prices and that simply if customers become poorer, then they don't go to restaurants as much and things like that. So this intervention by the farmers, and there the good thing is also that the official Farmers Association, the Bauernverband, and the sort of more alternative organization Landschaft verbindet, which is sort of more spontaneously, it exists now since some time, but these were in the past never on the same page. This time they are working together, and really I think this is extremely important. And you have a lot of support, from I would almost say it's almost all segments of the population have representatives thereof have expressed support. So I think this is extremely important, and I have the feeling that this could be really the beginning of a change of the situation in Germany altogether by asserting more sovereign rights, more the real interest of Germany, which in the recent period was completely trampled upon by the so-called former occupying powers, but some of them still think they are, and therefore they have tried to dictate policies in Germany which were absolutely detrimental against the interest of Germany. And I think this is now presenting the bill for that.
Now, in the context of what you just said, we have a question from Philip who asks, do German policymakers realize that the U.S. destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipelines was an act of betrayal by their so-called ally? And is it possible that this will provoke some kind of action to hold the U.S. accountable for what it's done?
Well, it may not have been in the mainstream media, because they would totally ridiculously sell all the cover stories, that it was some yacht with somebody in Poland and some Ukrainian crew, and this was the cover story, where many military experts pointed out the fact that to have a blast like that, which sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines, you can't do it with the kind of equipment like a sailing yard, and you just don't have the adequate equipment, like diving deeply. In any case, so the media always would present these cover stories, and there was no discussion. The government, Scholz, who in February 22 was at this famous press conference together with President Biden, where Biden said, we have ways to end the Nord Stream pipeline. And, a reporter was then asking a second time, what about it? He said, we will get rid of it, some quote like that. And Scholz was standing besides Biden like a little poodle under the shower. I mean, that's a German idiom I'm trying to translate. A watered poodle, we say. And the fact that the German government is not capable of representing the interest of the German people, and that the whole German economy is collapsing as a result, that was not in the main news, but I can assure you it was a subject of a lot of discussions, and I think it was one of the major reasons to erode the trust in the government. And the government in the polls right now is at an absolute low. And, it could even be if the government does not make an agreement and this continues, the government could be pushed out in a very short period of time. The only problem is, how do you organize an opposition, which is worth the name, given the fact, the head of the CDU is the former European chief of BlackRock, and that indeed poses some questions then on what the policy of the CDU would be. But anything which changes the present trajectory is good and opens up the way to have a real discussion, where should Germany go.
Now we have a question from Chris Kelly, who lives in Panama, who is reporting on the transition that's underway in Panama, has been underway for a while, from a physically productive economy to one based on financial services utilizing the dollar. He reports that shipping traffic in the canal is down, so government revenues are down. And he said, how will countries such as ours, Panama, survive when they're dependent on financial services related to the dollar? How can they survive? What can they do?
Well, obviously, this battle is not settled and is becoming more ferocious, because you can actually see that the effort to increase the role of the dollar again is clearly being pushed, like in the case of Argentina. But on the other side, I think that this year, 24, will be a year where the new economic system of the BRICS plus, the global majority, the countries who altogether represent way above 85%, who are trying to create a new economic system, maybe even a new reserve currency, but put economic cooperation on the agenda for the benefit of all participants. That is becoming the dominant tendency. And I think with the presidency of Russia, which started on the 1st of January for the BRICS, BRICS Plus, BRICS 10, and more than 30 countries having applied for membership for the next period, I think that will become the dominant dynamic. And, the countries who are still, using a financial system which only is good for the speculators, at least for the time being, before some major crash occurs, which only looks for the maximization of the profit of a relative small part of the population, while neglecting the common good of the vast majority. This is now, in my view, really not going to last forever. This was the prediction of my late husband, LaRouche, in 71, when Nixon replace the fixed exchange rates with flexible ones, he pointed out at that time that if you would continue on that road, it would lead inevitably to a collapse of the system. And even if it took half a century, which is a little bit longer than we could anticipate, because, we did not quite, really judge the enormous methods of the central banks to manipulate the markets, to, use this whole derivative system. But that derivative system may be the nail in the coffin of the system, because you have now 2 quadrillion outstanding derivatives which are unpayable. And I think that whole game is coming to an end. So I think that, in a certain sense, there is hope. It's not a settled battle, because, I can see that small countries which are in a geographical position, like Mexico, where many people said, we only have 2 problems. One is history and the other one is geography. I think Panama is not very much away from such a dilemma. But I think, the fact that there are now many, many countries really determined, and you have strong leaders, you have in the BRICS, you have several strong leaders. The South African case in Den Haag just is another proof of such strength of leadership. So I would not give up hope and, try to hold out.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche from the Schiller Institute. We have a few more minutes and a few more questions, Helga. You mentioned the role of BlackRock. We have a question here from a regular viewer who said, when you used to discuss the military-industrial complex, or the Mickey Mat, as Ray McGovern calls it, now you're calling it the military-financial complex. Does this reflect the role of companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and Silicon Valley?
Yes, I would suggest that you go on our website, where we have a fact sheet, because, before Christmas, we started this campaign to turn swords into plowshares, because the expenditures for the military-industrial complex in the West, in the United States, but increasingly also in Europe, is just such an enormous destruction of physical wealth that we, went back to this old ICEA 2.4 demand that swords should be put into plowshares. And, there are many, many, references in the church history where this demand was put forward. And, just a couple of days later, the Pope, in his Christmas message, also came out demanding exactly that. In the meantime, many more religious leaders have picked up on that. So I think the idea that, you have to basically, stop this incredible destruction of physical capacity and physical assets, which would be so much more urgently needed for issues of the common good, infrastructure, hospitals, schools, just enormous demand to overcome poverty, hunger, to develop fresh water. All of these things would require exactly those capacities which are now basically being thrown away in war and destruction. So then we looked into, who is actually owning these military industrial firms. Well, and it turns out it's not the industrial forces, but it's the financial powers of Wall Street, of the City of London and other financial centers, because they are basically managed and their stocks and things are being sold by the major financial investment corporations. So you can really see that the name should be changed from military industrial complex into at least military industrial financial complex, and then you have the ownership. So what to do about it? Well, we are working on legislation. We have written a first draft for the United States called the Conversion Act for the United States. I don't have the exact name now, but we put it underneath the webcast. And we are working on similar legislation or proposals for legislation in other countries. So, this has to come to an end, because if you don't do it, and if you keep militarizing the economies like the crazy EU is right now proposing, if you say that we have to prepare for war with Russia, what they're saying now openly in Sweden, in Finland, or in Germany, where the defense minister Pistorius says we have to get war ready. Who wants to get war ready? We don't want to end up in a situation where we will have World War III, because this would be a war nobody would survive. So anybody who says we should get war ready should better go and see his doctor for a referral to some other doctor. I mean, I don't want to elaborate that, you know what I mean. But this is insane. We should absolutely have a mobilization of the population for the transforming of the military industry into peaceful production, and then, we could find solutions to everything.
Well, and as you were asking or answering that question, we had someone write in, how can we get Congress to introduce the Swords into Plowshares Act? We will post that at the description section of the webcast, and people should take it out and organize it. Read it, study it, get the details of what Helga was just discussing in terms of who's running the military financial complex, and get this to your congressman, and be bold. Don't hold back. Helga, we have, let's see, a couple more questions. One from Sweden, from Stockholm. Even if South Africa gets the court case against Israel further, what official authorities does the International Court of Justice have? They don't have a police force, do they?
No, but I think that the International Court of Justice could do the investigation and then give the entire package, so to speak, to the International Criminal Court, who have a much larger jurisdiction. And I think that the fact that if such a case would get investigated in the South African government, they have provided already an 84-page documentation, which is very detailed and very thorough. So a lot of work has been done already. If that would be then more investigated, and it would become an issue of public discussion among the governments in the United Nations, in the UN Security Council, in the UN General Assembly, and other such fora, it would change the dynamic, because this whole system of the world has only functioned because there was a tremendous manipulation of public opinion. You didn't have truth, but you had the narratives which were promoted. Like, for example, the narrative on Gaza changed for a very long time, several months, 1, 2, 3 months. The narrative was that it was all the attack by Hamas on Israel which caused all of this trouble, and they completely left out the fact that there was a over proportional reaction by the IDF, that the military power of the Israeli army is so vast, superior, that they cordoned off the entire Gaza area, cutting people off food, medicine. All of this was for a long time not reported, and it only really broke, I would say, maybe 2 weeks ago, that the news became so overwhelming, so that even the governments or media, which in the beginning completely left out the other side, the over proportional reaction of the IDF, which clearly then revealed that the aim was not just to punish the attack of October 7th, but various Israeli ministers in the meantime came out and said openly they wanted to depopulate Gaza from all Palestinians, that they wanted to, transfer them to Sinai or to Jordan, or admitting ethnic cleansing. So only slowly, the narrative changed and the truth came out. So the advantage of having such a case in the International Court of Justice is that truth and justice have a chance again to be, visible and hearable. And that is, I think, the absolute precondition for any remedy of the situation.
Well, we have a couple of comments. Louisa writes that the world is dark and you are lighting the world. Thank you for what you're doing. And someone else wrote in and said, I will get on my congressman's rear end as soon as possible on this act. So Helga, I think and then someone else emphasized someone named Violin Hunter 2, that Germany needs to stop supporting Ukraine. I think you would agree with that. So do you have anything to add to finish the discussion today?
Well, I think people should really become active. This is a moment where to sit on the fence or to sit on the couch or to sit anywhere and not move is really not forgivable, because there are periods where for a long time nothing happens, and people have a certain reason to say, oh, one cannot do anything anyway, which is a sentence I wanted to outlaw with the punishment of dungeon a long time ago. I said, if anybody says this, they should have 10 years in the dungeon, because it's demoralizing other people. Now, joking aside, I think right now is the moment, where you have, I would not say it's like 89. It could become that. Remember that in 89, when millions took to the streets in East Germany, the wall came down, and there was, for a short period of time, a chance, what we called the star hour of mankind. Now, we know by now, and we even published a book about it, that chance of 89 was lost for many reasons. One reason was geopolitics, that the German unification, with the potential of having a peace order, including Russia, was clearly not in the design of, the US, Bush at the time, Margaret Thatcher, Mitterrand in France. So there were definitely manipulations to squash that potential. So, naturally now, if you ask the people from East Germany, what do they think about 89? They have a quite bitter view. They think that, that they were taken over by Western imperialist forces, that their entire life work has been cancelled. So there's a lot of bitterness in East Germany. And I think that is part of the reason why they never believed the narrative about, what is the reason for the Ukraine war, because their experience was very different. But, I think we can learn the lesson and basically say that if a system is coming down, like it is described in the Declaration of Independence, that I don't have the exact words now, but you all know it, that, you can endure a wrong government for a very long time, but then comes a point where you have to change it. That's the same subject like in the Wilhelm Tell, the play by Friedrich Schiller, which has these beautiful formulations, exactly like in the Declaration of Independence, that there are inalienable rights which are hanging in the sky. And, sometimes you have to reach and bring down the power of these stars on Earth. I'm now modifying it a little bit. But basically the idea that the inalienable rights are there, they're part of the creation, part of the universe, and they work. And hopefully, given the fact that we have now this unbelievable change from, the former colonial countries are rising, they don't want to be in this position anymore, and they're taking steps to develop themselves. If all we have to do really is that the people in the West, in the United States, in European countries, somehow form themselves into institutions to say we have to cooperate with the global South and create a new paradigm on the entire planet of cooperation. And every problem can be solved if we take that road. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and however, it does require for a lot of people to become active. So join the Schiller Institute, get active with us. We have lots to do.
Well, Helga, thanks again for joining us this week, and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, thank you, Harley.